Glad everyone's here today. And we have a good group, and we have two people that are critical for the first part of today's discussion. Because they're probably the most knowledgeable, I think. I may be wrong here as this discussion progresses, but last Zoom meeting, we were talking about mushin and ishin and various other terms. And because two more coming on here, because Darren Mellerin brought up 5 spirits of Budo. And so my initial question was, and the question still remained by the end of the discussion, was if mushin is no mind, which means your mind is clear and empty and whatever happens, happens. And zanshin is, what did we have zanshin as?
So one was lingering mind.
Pardon?
Like that. One of them was lingering mind. I remember that.
Lingering mind, or it's aware of what's going on. So that my concern was the thing that gets in the way of mushin is the preoccupied mind. It's whatever we're currently thinking about. Like James is worried about not having any audio. And I mean, it's just a good example. So that's what he may be thinking about. So my question is, since the one thing that gets in the way of mushin is the preoccupied mind, the conscious mind, what is the Japanese term, maybe one word or 2 words for the preoccupied mind? And Dane and Francis probably came up with the 2 best explanations, because they do have a much greater expertise in this terminology than I do. So, I'd like to see them bounce off each other for a while. Maybe they'll engage in a little verbal randori.
We hope not. Yes.
Or verbal kata exchange. And we may get to some understanding. I do not like to use the word consensus. I hated that word as an educator because administrators used it to get the minority to go along with the majority. I mean, so anyway, I don't like the word consensus. So I'd like to get some sort of agreement or understanding of a term for the preoccupied mind. So I'm going to turn this over to Francis and Dane and anyone else who wants to jump in, who feels qualified, who'd like to throw in their 37 cents. So, who wants
yes, to I'll put my 2 cents worth in to start. So, the term I might have mentioned in the email, a very typical Japanese everyday term. They use, I think it's kigozoro, which is like just preoccupied. Someone's preoccupied with thoughts of something else while they're busy doing a particular activity. The term that I think you mentioned, ishin, is a little bit it's a little bit like the Chinese idea of intent. That's actually a good thing to have, not a. So I guess we couldn't call that preoccupied, but the term. It's very hard to actually find a term about preoccupied. They seem to be more focused on, I guess, there's a gap in consciousness or mindfulness. You see terms like, they use the term ski, if anyone's ever heard of that before. So that's very much related to the martial side of things. So has anyone heard of a particular term for being preoccupied? That sort of thing. Speaking of martial arts, they would probably use a different term. But it doesn't seem to be something which is prevalent in this. The ideas of zanshin, they're all derived from esoteric Buddhism, so it gets a bit complicated. So, Dane, have you heard any particular term like that, like for being preoccupied? Say someone is withstanding an attack and they were preoccupied, therefore their defenses were down or something like that. If you heard of anything related to a shin, for instance?
Not directly, no. So when I found that, looking through things. So, you make a good point there that sometimes we have to separate out martial arts and like Buddhist philosophies, right? Because they were separate, so you have these warriors who are actually doing this stuff, on a battlefield, and they're trained in the battlefield techniques. And then outside of that, they would find these different methods of self-cultivation that they found useful for their combative strategies. So it's not like there were monks learning martial arts, right? They're martial artists learning from monks here and there, getting some, an idea here, an idea there. So they'll pull something in from, Shinto or Buddhism or Confucianism or, something else even, or an esoteric sect of those that aren't even compatible, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So like, for instance, like the meditation is an interesting one because we talk about mokuso, and that's different than zazen, which is like real meditation, and then mokuso is more like a light meditation. That's
It's a very stripped down version.
Focused.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That we practice. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
No, yeah, go on.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a great way of describing this. It's a very stripped down version of zazen, and that's the typical zazen where you're sitting in Caesar. It's a very, very complicated process. A lot of things going on you don't see, and people will in the religious side, they'll spend months doing things like that and walking meditation. The martial thing, as you rightly mentioned, was they were just the samurai and the others were very much only interested in the things they could take to the bank. And so you see there's a famous work called The Unfettered Mind, which explains a lot of these things. The big thing is, where do you put your mind? You can't put it in your sword because the sword can be taken away, or you can't put it in your hand, but you need to learn kata and technique at the beginning. But they talk about putting your mind in your tanden, the point, the hara, as a starting thing, but even that's wrong. So where do you put it? You don't put it anywhere. You let it go where it needs to go. And as you said, use the you need some form of meditation or discipline to do anything really, to actualize these ideas.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. You mentioned Seiza specifically. Like some arts don't use the word. Don't use mokuso because they're like, we're not even actually doing that, and like it's almost trademarked in a way, like, no, that's not actually what we're doing. Like I think kendo used to call it mokuso, and then they started calling it seiza, so they just sit in seiza. I actually did an aikido school that called it just seiza, just sit in seiza. And karate calls it mokuso a lot, but like we were saying here, they're taking and extracting concepts that help them on the battlefield, right? And then adapting it into a martial arts mentality. So I think sometimes with that, they aren't getting the full picture, and they're not concerned about the full picture, right? So having mushin is your goal, and that's you're focused on goals, right? And a samurai has like a kind of single-minded mentality, right, about what they need to do on the battlefield, and they need to be focused on things, right? So they're kind of focused on learning how to not focus in a way. So like their only goal is attaining mushin, and like they're not reading the literature about any other parts of it and like don't care.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Because
exactly.
mushin's what's useful to them. The
Yep,
opposite of it isn't. So they didn't ask that question, right? Like you'll
exactly.
talk to a lot of older sensei and they're like, I never asked. I don't know. You know,
Yep.
you don't talk about that. You
Ah, yes,
they gave you the lesson. You don't ask for more. You know, like,
yes. Yeah,
so
true,
I
true.
think that
Yeah.
that gets combined into this where we're
Mm,
getting mushin from people who took it from somebody without understanding it. And
yep.
but yeah, to the point of the ishin thing,
Mm,
that was something I just found in looking like specifically for what could be the opposite of mushin. That was like
mm,
specifically my quest. And that's where
yep.
I stumbled on that term. I hadn't heard it before.
Mm, mm,
Um, and I'm kind of taking it, you know, poetically to imply uh, like a single-mindedness, like a focus,
yeah.
like
Mhm,
you're preoccupied in the sense that you're actually your mind is on something, whatever it is.
mm.
And you know, when you're going into a battlefield, I mean, you're absolutely focused on battle. Your mind is on going to battle. But then in the moment of conflict, your mind has to not be on battle. And how do you flip that switch and then go back to it, which is the zanshin?
Yep.
It's not like exactly a light switch. It's more like a dimmer or something, right? Like you have to go
Ah,
from,
yeah, yeah, you're quite right.
you
It's
know,
a process of defocusing, and that ishin you brought up was a really good concept. Like it's the character I'm fairly sure is the same as Yi in intent, and intent leads the mind, leads the body. That's the originally Chinese idea. They use that in very slow and deliberate practice, a bit like Jushin, Sensei Kirby's practice. Um, and in the so I've learned a lot of the Koryu, the old style stuff, and they're very very deliberate. When you do your practice, you'll see people standing and actually facing each other, the gamai thing, and that's actually the most important part of the practice. That's Zanshin's right at the end. You have uh, zanshin, as in Zen, the mind which comes before. That's you standing there and attending with presence before anyone's done anything. Before you might be 20 feet away. You'll see that in the weapons schools, especially. And Tsuchin, while you're doing the activity, you have complete mindfulness of perhaps your body, of the environment. And it's a very, very, very complicated process. That's why they spend years doing that. The concept of sparring or something, that's years away. And not even don't even bother with that unless you can do. And zanshin is right at the end. So we often see that where I uh, use the example of the Navy SEALs. They say, when is the mission finished? It's finished when you're in the showers, not when you've finished engaging the enemy, not when you're back on the submarine, not when you're in the boat. When you've done everything, put your weapons away, taken off your gear, you're in the showers, that's when the mission's finished. So Zanshin is like your movement, your technique, whatever is done when you've subdued the enemy, finished them off, or simply disengaged and you're at a safe distance and your awareness remains. So it's a very complicated process.
Can I ask something for the rest of us that are doing our best to follow you? Uh, uh, is it possible to list the major things like ishin and then mushin and then zanshin, which I think are the three major sequences? That's what I'm getting out of this. And then in between those, you may have other subsequences. I think that's what Francis was saying or alluding to, that it's not one, then you jump into the other, then you jump into the other, and now you're done and life goes on. Could both of you send me just like a brief note of what the sequence would be with the major phrases and then the minor ones and what they mean in English very simply?
Yep.
Uh,
I sent you since I sent you an email. I've sent it via Darren because I think you maybe didn't get it originally, but I'll resend it. Could you put your maybe just in the chat, type in the best email address, please? when you have a chance.
Whose email address?
Yours. I think the ones I've been sending it to, it's been missing somehow.
It would be Sensei GK
Okay. Yep.
at Budoshin.com. And the five spirits of Budo. Yeah, I don't even know if it'll show up on there. Why does
good. Thanks, Dane. Yeah,
I-
we got it. Yep. Thanks. Dane just typed it in the. Oh, that's right. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And those
Okay.
are there, but that's what kicked me off was all these things are it's they can be put in an order to have a sequence, but to me what was missing was the preoccupied mind. What gets in the way of all of this smooth flow? What gets in the way of us, how do you say, being able to have it's not a mindset because the mind is not set. What enables our mind to function without a conscious effort on our part, or mentally conscious effort on our part. We just do it.
I think it's kind of the self, right? Like, I think it's the self. Like, you get in your own way, right? You're the distraction of everything. So ultimately, I think what you're trying to do is remove you from you. Like, remove yourself from the equation, so you just do. Like, when you say somebody did a selfless act, right? Like, you jump in the freezing water to rescue somebody. That's literally selfless in the real sense. Like, yourself didn't make that decision. You just acted. That this kid needs to.
It's like the email you sent me yesterday about
Right.
I didn't hit him.
Right.
My mind
did it
hit
itself. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean that expressly for like samurai, taking heads all day. You got to go from head to head to head. You can't have time to, oh my God, what have I done? What have I become?
No.
You've got 30 more of these to do before you go home.
Right.
You need to have a way to dissociate in a way too. And it just needs to happen. Like Bruce Lee, to paraphrase him, he said, like, he's giving a lesson, and he says, when the moment happens, I won't hit, it'll hit by itself.
Right.
Like, that is a state of mushin.
Right.
He's talking about attaining that mushin there. Like, I won't be there. It's just going to be between you and my hands,
Right. And the students I've had that have been in street situations, they did not know what they were going to do. It just happened. They were surprised that whatever they did actually worked. And what got them most upset was that the technique did what it was supposed to do. And that's the way, that was the hard part for them to understand. So you're saying, the hit is separated from the person is an excellent analogy, because they really they were surprised the technique worked.
I think that's the most important part there, right?
Yes.
So that kind of proves the thing. So the technique that they actually successfully used when they got out of the way of themselves is one that if they actually thought, I'm going to use this, they would have also thought, I don't think it's going to work.
That's a possibility.
And then it wouldn't work, right? Because they were surprised that it worked, which means they kind of thought it wouldn't. So you either would hesitate and not use it, or you would do it wrong because you think it won't work, right?
Right.
So when you just let the technique do the technique works.
Yeah.
Right. It's only you who can fail the technique, not the technique.
Yeah, it's the same thing as driving to work. If you thought about all the things you had to do to make it to work, you'd probably never get there.
So there's an awesome Greek philosophy thing. I can't remember the philosopher now. It'll come to me like 3 hours from now. But essentially, he proves that you can't do anything, and the way he proves it is you have an archer and a tree, and he says, okay, for the arrow to hit the tree, it first has to travel half of the distance, right? and it does, right? So your arrow has to go halfway before it can go all the way. Well, now from the halfway point, it needs to continue and do another half, and then it needs to go that half, and then that half, and that half, and that half. But you can do that infinitely.
Yeah, that's
There's always
Zeno's
another half.
paradox.
Right. Yes. Yep. So you can't complete an infinite series. So arrows cannot hit trees. And really, it's about a matter of perspective, right? If you think the arrow has to complete those things, then it never will. But if you think step one is launch the arrow, step two is the arrow hits the tree, the arrow hits the tree.
Exactly.
But if
Yeah.
you
So
think it
that's
has to-
Zeno's paradox. That's a great example, and you've described the process very well. The term they often used in the samurai interpretation of this, the mind states, is the divided mind, and you've described that very, very well. Dividing into techniques, into steps. Doing a premeditated response will guarantee that it doesn't work. No plan survives first contact with the enemy, so to speak, and by not having your mind anywhere, not dividing it, that's the first step. The immovable mind, the Budoshin, is the process they generally talk about. The way I've learned it is Budoshin, the immovable mind, comes first. And what the hell's that? It's basically don't discipline your mind not to run away. When you're doing kata, when you're doing practice, you are 110% there. And sometimes that might take pain. I used to get hit when we were distracted, we would get hit with a stick because, and you wouldn't forget that. But obviously that's an extreme case.
Okay.
Yeah, so a very good way.
Anybody want to add anything to this, or?
I'd like to jump in for just a moment. Not that I belong in this conversation, but a couple of things came to mind back a few months ago when I was in college. I exaggerate, but only slightly. I remember studying in philosophy courses about the mind-body dichotomy. And this whole topic seems to be optimizing, rather than thinking, does the body exist to serve the mind, or does the mind exist to serve the body, and separating those two. The whole idea of that is kind of like a rabbit hole you don't need to go down. This discussion we're having seems to be, how can we optimize our mind so that our body can do what it's been trained to do? And it's like a letting go process, a trust fall, forward, not backward. Am I missing the boat here, or is this simply optimizing our mindset so that our body's skill set can also be optimized? All of us at one time or another have felt mushin. Someone's come at us during randori. We automatically do something. I've actually had thoughts of, I'm going to do thus and such, but while I'm thinking that, my body does something else that's equally or more effective. And I'm watching my body do stuff that is almost like an out-of-body experience.
So could I ask, were you in a disassociated state, like you're almost watching yourself doing it?
Correct. And a disassociated state, but also not a disassociated state, if that makes sense. I mean, I was very much aware I was doing what I was doing and participating, but I've had both experiences where I see an attack, I think I'm going to do thus and such, and I do something else, or I see an attack and I don't think, and I just do. And I've had both experiences. Both were effective. But the point I'm making is, does this whole topic simply about optimizing our mindset to optimize our body's skill set? That's my question.
Sounds good to me.
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer, because both are dependent. They're each dependent on each other. They can't be done in isolation.
Wouldn't this be like getting them both on the same page, though? Very intentionally?
You mentioned letting go. So how did you do that? How would one let themselves go to allow the technique to happen?
When it happens without thinking, it feels like letting go.
One thing because I'm tentatively doing a project for someone, and I can't mention much more than that, but one of the things that it stresses is to breathe. They said breathe, that relaxes. If you breathe, that relaxes your body. When you do a technique, you cannot do it effectively if you're inhaling. If you fire a handgun or rifle, you don't pull the trigger when you are inhaling. You pull the trigger when you're exhaling. Okay. And the same thing maybe has to do with ki. If you're breathing, you exhale, that's your ki being extended. Okay. And maybe that plays into the letting go, and your mind just does its thing without thinking. It's as I think I mentioned to Dane in the email, we've been going back and forth on this a little bit too. It's essentially a subconscious act by your mind, because your conscious mind cannot think that fast. So it's something that, the brain cells are all lined up. It's just the brain cells need to connect, and they can do it a lot faster subconsciously than you can do it consciously. So maybe mushin is the subconscious mind in action, and the preoccupied mind is the conscious mind. I'm just getting this now. The brain cells are lining up. The conscious mind is the preoccupied mind.
Yep.
Because you're consciously thinking about stuff.
Yeah, I think this might, I don't know if this will help or make it worse, but that's kind of my thing. It's yin and yang, right? So you've got your mind and your body. They chase each other around in a circle, but
Right.
they're also part of each other, right? So you need to discipline your mind to discipline your body in a certain way. And you also vice versa need to discipline your body to release your mind, right?
Yes.
So that's what you're doing when you do any martial arts training.
Yes.
When you stand in a stance for 20 minutes, you're training your body physically, but you're training your mind as well, right? And then once you're in the mind, there's a yin and a yang. There's that conscious and that subconscious, right? So everything has a yin and a yang in it, including yin and yang. Like even
Right.
within, that's why the dots are in the thing, because even one of them isn't even one of them, right?
I
Yin
will
and
tell
yang's inside of yin and yang.
I will tell my students, stop trying so hard to do the technique. Relax. Because if your body relaxes, it's more receptive to what I don't know, it's whether you want it to do or what you think it should do. I have to figure that one out still.
Sensei, the same thing happens with people who are improvising on a piano. If you want to think about what you're doing, it's not going to work near as well as if you just zone. You go to the zone and off you go.
Yeah.
I've got a friend who improvises very well. If I videotape him from behind and listen to his playing, it's on a wonderful level. If I stand over him and he's aware I'm videotaping him, all of a sudden he's holding back and the improvisation doesn't fall flat. It's still going to work. That's what jazz pianists do, but it doesn't have the depth, the character, the charm, the appeal that the other has. And all of a sudden he becomes conscious, as you were saying, instead of just unconscious and letting us accessing that part of his brain that says, hey, I'm going here and here and here.
I think what you're saying is that if the person's mind and body is relaxed, it can do, I don't know what the proper term is, it can do what it's trained to do, or it can do what it does because it's trained. Those are two entirely different things. because it's been through the process. And I agree with you. You know, I've had students, and I watched, you know, when I used to be a year coordinator, at a kid who you give him a lead pencil, kid was phenomenal. He could draw, give him a number 2 pencil, he could do anything with it. And he dropped out of high school to go to work for Hanna-Barbera, which probably Dennis McCaffrey is familiar with. They don't exist anymore. But they hired him out of high school. He didn't even graduate. Kid was phenomenal. But if you asked him to do regular stuff, he was not, he was not an academic student. But he was a great kid, and he's probably in his 50s by now, and had a phenomenal talent. And the thing is, we all have this talent. How do we, you know, we all have certain unique talents. How do we, and maybe the mushin, ishin, zanshin stuff is a way of helping us to, I don't know whether it's develop this talent in almost any field. I don't think it's specifically martial arts. Develop this talent in almost any field, or use the talent. Because when you use the talent, you get better at it. And I think that's one of the failings of education, but anyway, that's another story. When I was in high school, I worked for a guy who dropped out of, I worked in a custom machine shop for a guy who dropped out of school in the 8th grade to help support his family. And he had, in the early 60s, he had a 6-figure income. Guy was phenomenal. You know, people have talent. And I think one of the things that the martial arts intently works on, when it says stop thinking, stop trying, just, and I know you've heard this from your sensei, just do the technique. It really stresses the ability of the subconscious mind to do things that we might not normally be able to do, or the average person may not, whatever average is, because none of us are average. What we can do. And now we have Thomas Deneen joining us. We have 2 Thomases. Okay. Anyway.
George, you made a comment a moment ago about making a distinction between something that's innately behavioral and something that we learn to do. And I understand what you're saying, but I think the two actually join. When I can do something automatically, the mushin, where I do a technique and I don't remember what I did, my body just does it.
Right.
That's the same physiological pathway inside our bodies as putting your hand on a hot stove, where that's innate. Almost everybody is going to do that regardless of any kind of training. But that doesn't mean we can't do other things and get to the same point where our bodies respond as automatically as if we put our hand on a hot stove. And it's the training over and over again that sets those pathways and gets them in place, so it bypasses the conscious mind.
Right. Beautiful.
Yeah, so Thomas, can I ask you something about that? Great points. So how much of it is learning the art, pre-programming things, or are we like the Michelangelo sculpture where he was asked, how did you do such a beautiful work? Well, I just took away all the unnecessary pieces. The sculpture was already there. I just uncovered it. So which of those is true, do you think?
From my experience, I understand the concept that you're describing what Michelangelo said, but from my experience, it's the repetition over and over again. And that does come from a Western science point of view, understanding how the neural pathways work. And the things that I've done over and over and over again are the ones that I don't have to think about. I just uncovered, we moved a few months back, and I've had a piano and a whole bunch of music that's been in storage for a long time, but pulling it out, and there are a couple pieces in there that I knew decades ago. I sit down and took a little while, but learned to play them again. And I could actually carry on the conversation with my wife on a couple pieces, and my body was playing just as well. As soon as I looked at my hands, I couldn't play it.
Wow, the spell was broken. And my next question, if I may, is we've got a few piano senseis here, including Master Clark. Is there any hope for us post-50-year-olds to pick up the piano and actually learn it?
Absolutely.
The first months I taught, I observed that the older students learned faster than the younger. And I was of the school, old dogs can't learn new tricks. I was wrong. And I've seen many other piano teachers who've been teaching decades agree, both in print and in interviews. And the concept is frustrated me at first. My best guess, and I can't say it for sure, but is that adults have learned how they learn. They bring that experience to the table when they want to learn something new. And that wisdom works to their advantage.
I would add to that the one thing that does get in the way is for an adult who's used to being proficient in things and then going to something that they have no proficiency at, that their expectation of I should be able to just do this after years of being an adult, that gets in the way. If they can get past that, I agree with you. They'll pick it up pretty quickly.
And I stop them in their tracks because we all beat ourselves up with the word should and ought.
Yeah.
And we take it out of the vocabulary. You're on a path. Enjoy where you are, and you'll enjoy where you're going.
When I have new students, and I'll say this time after time after time, I said, when you start, you're learning something entirely new and different that your body has never done before. And you're going to be clumsy and awkward and get frustrated and everything else. And all of that is completely normal, part of the process, and don't worry about it. Don't let it keep you from progressing. And new students, I say, if you stick with this, you will be, in 5 or 6 weeks, you will be amazed at what you can do. I said, the problem is not your body. The problem is what's between your ears. And as teachers or sensei of anything, that is probably our greatest challenge, is to get between our students' ears and get rid of all the rubbish.
So that something was when Francis and Thomas were talking about the Michelangelo thing, there was something like ruminating here in my brain, and you just made it squeeze out, I guess. So that's a really great question. So basically, as I'm understanding it, is it something that's like a cumulative, additive process of gaining things to become something, or is it chiseling away the things that aren't that thing? And at first I was thinking that's a false choice in a way. Take like in a sculptor sense, you first have to be able to use a chisel. So every day you have to additively develop those skills by just practicing chiseling on rocks for, just fun. And like those rocks didn't have any sculptures hidden inside of them. Their purpose was only practicing chiseling, right? But then when the time that you're a good chiseler comes, now you're creating your art. And now creating art using your tool is where you remove the things that aren't your art. And where I think that ties in here is I think while you're learning your art, you're doing that first thing. You're just learning how to use a tool. But then when you're using the tool, that's when you can look at it like in karate, Funakoshi has a saying that you don't think of winning, you think of not losing. So like really in an altercation, what you've done is whatever it took not to lose. You chiseled away the rock that was losing. You know what I mean? You just got rid of the stuff that makes you lose, and that's how you win. You just don't lose. That's how you win.
Okay.
It's that same kind of idea. And then it occurred to me that how does the sensei-student relationship tie into this concept, right? So when you're learning to use a chisel, you're learning how to use a tool. So you're the student learning to, class every day, practicing your skill. But the sensei is watching you and developing you into a better person. You don't even know what's in store for you from the lessons that'll progressively happen to you. But your sensei does. He has an overarching concept for your development. So he's chiseling away everything that isn't a good jujitsuka in you while you're learning how to use a tool. He's creating a sculpture, but you're the same actor. So I just think that's just something that I thought was interesting to discuss with you guys. What do you think of that? Like, it's not just one thing, right? It's kind of depending on who you're talking to.
Right. I think what you mentioned, you chisel away at the rock until you become proficient enough so that you know what you're chiseling towards, or you know what you're going to, you have an idea what you're going to create. And then you said at that point, it's an art. And maybe our goal as sensei is to get, like you said, they've got the tool, you're trying to get the sculpture. And when the two meet, when the student realizes, well, this is what this does, and I can do this, at that point, they've gone from maybe a do or a way to a jitsu or art. Because now they realize, okay, now I've got this. I had a last Tuesday, I have a new student who's about 5 or 6, been in the class 5 or 6 weeks, and she knows how to do the hand throw, and she knows how to do the key, we taught the key term, or a tamamaki kobe. And I said, do you realize both these techniques are identical? And she said, you mean I'm turning his hand and his head in the same direction, and I'm moving my left leg back and turning my body? That's the same motion, isn't it? And I said, yes. I said, get your uke, and I want him to kick at you, and you're going to take his foot and do the same thing, ashimaki komi. And she says, those are all the same technique. And I said, you've got the concept. Now you need to get better so it's just totally automatic. But, it simplified everything tremendously for her, because she was more in tune now with what her body was doing rather than what the attacker's body was doing. And that's ideally where we want to get our students, so that they can be in a state of mushin. It's not what your attacker is doing, it's what you do. And I've said many times, I'm sure you've heard me, at some point in your training, you realize the attack is irrelevant. You're going to do whatever your body decides you're going to do. And there are very few attacks that are, how do you say, defense specific. So anyway, what I want to do, we have some people just sitting here watching, and Thomas Deneen's about ready to fall over and go to sleep. No, I'm only kidding.
I'm just trying to do some flexibility exercises. It's not you, it's me.
Sorry, we didn't pick on you.
No, this has been fascinating. I'm sorry I was late getting here, but this is all really valuable. To touch on one of the points that Thomas brought up earlier, and I guess Francis may have picked up on, is the musical instrument analogy. And there is a very significant parallel for me between having learned an instrument, in my case mostly guitar, although I played piano, and it's the same kind of feeling where if you study an instrument for years, the neural pathways are will never be obliterated. That if you sit down for a few weeks and start practicing pieces that you learned decades ago, in my case, they'll come back to the same level or better once you start practicing again.
Yeah.
And having taken long breaks from jiu-jitsu, I think the same is true for many techniques. After years of not doing basic throws, they all came back within a few weeks of training again. And I guess my question is, how much training, how much ongoing training, how much frequency is necessary to keep your skills at a basic level where if a street attack happens, you'll have the essentials ready to go if typical attacks occur, although I guess there's nothing like a typical attack, but having the basics ready to go. And it's sort of parallel to being able to sit down and play a piano piece at will and competently. And curious if others have experienced this, but it's kind of an ongoing concern. Darren and I were discussing earlier the self-defense oriented aspect of what Budoshin does, and most of these traditional forms that we follow do, and how the primacy of street attacks and being able to defend ourselves from them is kind of always there. So we're not preparing to be involved in MMA or BJJ competitions, which is a very specific way of preparing for one event where there are clear-cut rules. This is more out on the street where there are no rules, and how are you always ready for those moments? And it's a question that continues to plague me as I get older. Well, now that I'm 55, what kind of training do I have to do and to be ready for that kind of thing?
Okay. Gary,
Go ahead.
I want to go around and pick up some of these people that have been sitting here taking it all in. And Gary, any thoughts on your part or questions?
Good evening, Professor, and everybody else. Greetings from South Africa. Just a little thing that I was picking up with what I was hearing is, this is almost like our bodies being in autopilot. When it was mentioned earlier that driving in a vehicle, you're not necessarily consciously thinking about how you're getting to your destination, not even changing gears, driving correctly, using your indicators, whatever the case may be. And I find that a lot of that also translates into our jiu-jitsu. When you've practiced the techniques often enough, it does become second nature. And yes, you would obviously, I find that, especially with me getting older now, that I have to repeat them more often now than before, so that I can keep in tune with what I've lost and what I need to keep up to date. But it is more just a sense of autopilot. You're not actually thinking about it. And maybe that's, I don't know if I'm hitting the nail on the head or if I'm completely missing the mark, but that's how I see it.
Okay. Dennis McCafferty.
Yeah, I've been taking all this in. It's been really informative, very educational. While I don't have a musical instrument analogy to apply here, I was an actor for 20 years, and there's a very similar process that happens, especially if you've done theater. The preparation is not dissimilar. You have to learn something in a set rote, and you do it. You're taking lines that somebody wrote, you're internalizing them, or you're starting internally and bringing the lines in, whatever your process happens to be. But there are those moments, and they don't happen a lot, unfortunately, or maybe they do if you do it longer and longer, and your career goes maybe a little longer than mine did. But there's that mushin process that happens at that state that you're in. And Gary described it as autopilot, and you can look at it as that. But of course, you know the lines, but there's a flow. There's something happening through you that you can't really define. And it very much is a flow. It's like you are, I hate to use the word channeling because it gets so misused, but it's not inappropriate to use in that sense that something's just moving through you. You're not thinking, it's just happening. You are reacting, you are responding, and you're reacting. And it's very much like, I think, what we're talking about here. Something that made me think while we were talking about all this was how you would apply some sort of, I don't know, meditative state. I don't know, it would be zanshin. I don't think it's mushin, but maybe it is mushin, to a jushin process. And jushin is not something that we really spoke about too much here yet, but in my dojo, we've actually created a couple of jushin processes. They're very much like karate katas, where we take a series of moves. One is a throwing sort of sequence, and another is a striking sequence, and put them together and do them slowly and concentrate on form. And I wonder how that process can marry with this this meditative state. If anyone has any thoughts on that.
I do, but that's actually 2 topics down.
Okay.
And it is related, but Jushin does involve a lot of other factors as well. But yes, yeah, Jushin does help you develop mushin. And if you don't know, Jushin very basically is going, and the same thing is, you see it in almost every martial art, but not too much in jiu-jitsu. You're basically, it's a solo activity. It's almost like a dance, but you go through the movements of the technique very slowly, making sure that your body is in the right place. It's an excellent way to find out whether you're balanced. It's like very much like Tai Chi. You know, if you're not balanced, you're going to fall down. The same thing happens with Jushin. If you're not balanced, you're going to fall down. And it really helps you develop, you know, where things ideally should be if everything worked perfectly and you had no resistance from your attacker. And, you know, all these things are perfect. It's an ideal situation. And then you get to deal with reality. But yeah, but we will get to that. I don't think we're gonna hit on it today, but Jay, 2 cents. No audio.
Sensei, I've got something, if I may jump in here, that goes to what Thomas Deneen was asking about, maintaining that which we've learned, and which Dennis was just alluding to as well. And perhaps the best way to maintain our skill set is mat practice. However, that's something that requires somebody else. It also requires access to dojo and so forth, and all that's great. We can do that, but we can also practice by ourselves with visualization. And the reason for the books that I wrote on this is so that I very selfishly can review any of the 200 techniques from Hachikyu through Godon. So it's not unusual at night for me to grab my book on the 200 techniques listed by belt level and say do third degree. Do the 9 techniques that are at third degree brown belt. And I'll use the prompts and I'll go through all 9 and do them and then put the book down, go to sleep. The next night I might do purple belt or I might do Godon. But I can go through all 16 techniques, say at purple belt, in a matter of 15 minutes or less visualization. And then when I'm on the mat, those things are fresh. It's the same reason quarterbacks go through a 2-minute drill in the locker room. So it's a great way, personally, for me to maintain the knowledge that and thanks to my mat experience, I can draw from that to visualize.
Dave, that's so encouraging. And having done martial arts that are kata based, and in this context I mean going through movements patterns alone without the desire to have other partners, it's where there's visualization involved. And it's mostly punching and kicking arts or weapons-based arts where this happens. But what you're talking about is a way of doing jiu-jitsu that I didn't think was as feasible as that. And it's very encouraging to hear that. So you go through techniques that normally in a dojo where we'd be throwing or applying some joint lock to someone, and that works for you.
Yes, I am definitely visualizing the training partner, the opponent, the attacker, the aggressor, whatever. There's 2 of us in this visualization, me and the person that's receiving the technique. I'm constantly Tori and they're constantly Uki in my visualizations. I'm not claiming that this makes me any kind of superior. It's just selfishly my way of enjoying jiu-jitsu and maintaining as best as I am able. And
I've just been skeptical if that works that's COVID invited this skepticism about any kind of martial art where it's all about contact with other people. And that's very encouraging because if that works for you, it's that the amount of time you spend on the mat can never, in my mind, equal the amount of time you have alone when you can possibly train. And it's
absolutely.
I hear you've gotten so much out of this. It's very encouraging.
Sensei, have you
learned
heard
early on that I was going to spend 2 hours outside of class for every half hour I spent on the mat, and I probably still do that. Perhaps more so, since a whole lot more so since COVID. And slowly reopening our dojo here. So anyways, when I use the word selfish, I don't use that humbly. I use it because how else are we supposed to maintain 200 5-part techniques, 1,000 sequenced moves? Granted, some of them are repeat from other techniques, but they're still part of a 5-part sequence: attack, block, strike, throw, and submit for each one. If I'm doing the prompt and it's not clear enough to me, I go back to the quick cross reference, which is the first part of the book, which has all 5 listed out. The prompt just has enough information to kick my mind in and go, oh, I remember doing that one, and then go through the whole sequence. The last part of the book just has what I would receive as a test, and that is the English name, the Japanese name, the attack. That's it. And from that, when I can do that, I know that I'm mentally ready to test on this again. So I go back to the testing part. So I use all 3 parts of the book, but I focus on the prompt section.
Okay. Well, I think Jay was talking. Jay, were you? Then Jay, I think you were saying something, and then we somehow segued into to Dave. Or do you have audio, Jay? Okay, Darren.
Hi everyone. Sensei, I have a lot of comments as it's related to this topic, both mushin and zanshin, and how it relates. I'm currently practicing in my own regard right now, in own perspective, my own mushin zanshin in a different light. If I could respectfully take a seat to this topic right now as I continue to observe what comments are made, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay. I think Dave's comment that, I tend to practice techniques a lot in my mind. And I don't do with any particular belt per se, but and fortunately, because I'm teaching every week, it does keep some things, I say, at the tip of my tongue, for lack of a better phrase. I think it's essential that you have some regular training time. Otherwise, it's inevitable. Things do slow down a bit, or you may not have your no mind may not function as well as your no mind should be functioning, for lack of a better phrase. Jay, there's still no audio from you. Where's Jay? No, it's you there. Your mic's on. Anyway, but I think it's essential that as Dave said, you periodically go back, you review in anything you do in life, because that maintains your overall skill level. And Thomas, getting back to the piano after X number of decades, he's picking things up. I used to play the guitar a lot. And this other teacher and I, when I taught junior high, we would do twice a year, we'd do concerts for maybe 300-400 kids. We'd go 6 hours, and we had a ball, but those were the 60s and 70s with a different type of music. But in any case, and I haven't picked up a guitar in 20, 25 years, but I'd love to go back to it someday. Because it's, how do you say it? To me, it's like jiu-jitsu. It's fun. It's enjoyable. It's relaxing.
I don't know.
Okay, Jay, we got some audio here. You want to put your...
I learned now. Yeah, I've learned a lot today. I really have. I really enjoy it.
Good. Do we want to do anything else with mushin, zanshin, no mind?
How much time do you have, sir? We can be here all day with that.
Reason I'm
going to say the same thing.
We've been going for about 61 minutes, 71 minutes on this topic, which I think is phenomenal. And there have been a lot of diverse opinions, and it's kind of segued into other stuff and come back, which is really how I like to see a discussion going. It's a continuation from the last discussion. It's like when I was a teacher, I loved it when I could say, okay, tomorrow, we're having this discussion. Tomorrow we're going to continue. It had nothing to do with the class course, but whatever discussion topic we were on, it's just, it works. And because everybody is interested, and most people can provide some really valid and good input, and so everybody remembers it more. But I'm hesitant to get into something else because I really don't like to go over 90 minutes, and we're at about 75 minutes right now. So
it was something, if I may,
sure.
Just on there was something Sensei Clark mentioned, and the Thomas as well about visualization. So I don't know if anyone's heard about that study. It was done probably about 30 years ago, looking at visualization wasn't considered that serious. I think it was basketball free throws were the skill in question.
Yeah.
They had 3 groups. One did nothing. Basically, they were the control group. One test group went out and actually shot and practiced physically, and the third did nothing but visualization. And I've got a feeling that Thomas knows this very well. So perhaps he'd like to explain to us. He'd probably do a better job than me.
Well, you've already set up the experiment, and most people can guess the people who actually were practicing doing free throws improved significantly over the people who had done nothing over the course of. I don't remember how long the test period, the experiment went on for, but there was significant improvement for the people who were actually doing it. The interesting part was the people who were doing the visualizations, while they weren't as good as the people who practiced, they were still significantly better, statistically better than the people who had done nothing. So the visualization without actually doing any physical free throws still improved their ability to do free throws. That experiment stuck in my mind for decades, and I wish I could find the paper that talks about it. I hope it's not apocryphal anymore.
I feel like for that to excuse me, I feel like for that to apply to us here, the study would need to be people practicing free throws without visualization and people practicing free throws with it. Like, I think you absolutely have to practice, but I think your practice is influenced by your visualization. You know, like you can't only visualize the piano and then play it, right? You have to first be competent at it, and then you can visualize what you're doing to get better or maintain that level of thing, I think. But I think the practice part has to be there. It can't be removed. It's just, are you having a mindful practice where you're visualizing these things? I think you'd have a better outcome. And I guess that they had any improvement from only visualization helps, right? To support that. But I don't know. What do you think?
It's quite possible that the people who are doing the visualization only were more mindful than the people who are doing the free throws. I agree. You can't do the free throws practice physically without thinking about it, having some sort of visualization. But you can go through the motions and not actually be thinking about it that much. The people who are doing the visualization, and I'm speculating now, I don't have any science to back this up, but I'm guessing that the people who were doing just the visualization, they were much more mindful and much more focused on what they were doing than even the people who were physically doing the practice.
Okay, let's I think what I want to do, just because we can deal with this briefly anyway, is switch to, since we mentioned Jushin earlier, since Dennis has mentioned, just for those of you who are not familiar with it and or the term, because it does apply, and it actually is visualization of some jiu-jitsu techniques, Jushin simply means gentle spirit. At least that's how I'm translating it. And it basically means you're going through the moves, you're going from one technique into another related technique to make your movements almost seem like a series of dance steps. You're moving your whole body. You know, you're going, for example, a hand throw, you might do a deflection to the right and then connect and bring the hand over and pivot your left leg back as you turn your body to your left because you're looking to your left. And, you know, or for a strike to the nose, you might block out and then come in with a, you know, it's just very slow movements, like that, almost like Tai Chi. it can be a form of exercise. It works I've done it to very limited extent. It does work very well to help people improve their balance. They do get the movements of a technique down. The downside is because you're not interacting with a human body, you don't know how that body's going to respond. And that obviously affects the reality. But it does give you some practice with the movement in an ideal situation. It can be done solely as an exercise, like Tai Chi is done. And most people do not equate Tai Chi with the martial art Tai Chi Chuan. Okay. Or it can be done with, okay, I'm just doing my jiu-jitsu techniques very slowly without another person. But as Thomas has said, and I think Dane and everybody else has said, is if you have prior experience in doing what you're now practicing by yourself or visualizing, you will be far more effective with it once you start practicing with another person or practicing with a real piano or things of that sort. I think prior experience is a definite asset because that information is in your mind already. You just need to dig it back up. And that's where, like Thomas, going back to the piano, he has all the knowledge there. He has the expertise there. It's just a matter of where are those brain cells and let me get them organized again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's in anything we do, we tend to say, oh, I forgot how to do this. And the reality is you don't forget anything. You just can't find it. And after a while, if you do enough digging, you'll find it. And people say we only use a small part of our brain, and maybe it's because there's a lot of room we're using for storage. But in any case, I think Thomas brings up a very valid point. We've all brought up some really valid points in terms of mindfulness, non-mindfulness, subconscious, conscious, and how it affects what we do in almost anything we do in life. And it was a great discussion. I enjoyed it. And I want to thank Dane and Francis and everyone else for getting their 3 or 4 cents in. And but I think that's what we're going to stick with today. And next time, and what we've hit. Does anyone need to mention anything about Jushin? There is, if you have access to Untitled Spaces with a BJJY membership, there is a video that deals with Jushin facetiously, and it's not online, but at one summer camp, I don't know whether it was one that Dave was at or Thomas was at years ago. We actually practiced footwork, jiu-jitsu footwork. We made it into a line dance.
Yeah.
Were
I had to fake the music for that because we were concerned about copyright.
Right, and so that's why I've never put it on the air, because I've never gone instead of asking for permission. Can I put this out there? And what was the mean? Something the jukebox?
Oh, I don't remember.
It's a Western song, but
Yeah, Jukebox Hero?
What?
Jukebox Hero?
No, it's a great line dancing song. And what was really funny was watching all these black belts do a line dance in their judo gi to practice footwork. You know, how do you say it? I think part of our problem is, you know, as sensei, and I know that even as a teacher, we tend to take ourselves too seriously at times. And you sometimes using a sense of humor gets an idea or a concept or a technique across a lot faster and better than being very serious about it. Couple
You
weeks
know,
ago,
it's funny. All of the Japanese instructors or Okinawan instructors that I've ever worked with are absolutely funny and relaxed and, you know, take it easy. And it's like every American trying to put this like strict Japanese discipline on you. I find it interesting that it's always been like American senseis trying to seem Japanese that are like stern and do that, but your Japanese senseis are like funny and tell you jokes. And like,
I mean, you know,
it's an interesting thing.
you know, when I got to know Wally J, he had a tremendous sense of humor, really dry and very subtle, but it was there, you know. And a couple of weeks ago, I was teaching a technique, you know, from I think a hand throw, rolling the person over, and ending up with a shoulder lock. And so I have a bad habit of going into rhyme, and the whole description of what I was doing was done to rhyme, and I couldn't repeat that rhyme if my life depended on it.
You were in mushin.
Or mushin, but the students, they were able to do that. You know, they were, you know, they were paying attention to the rhyme, I think. And they were able to do the technique, you know. So I think sometimes if and this is totally off the subject here, sometimes we can use humor to deal with a very serious topic. And
Sensei, my experience is that the best teachers use humor because they realize it opens up learning channels that
yes,
otherwise would not open up.
yes,
So they very intentionally include it as often as they're able.
right, because you can't here's we're gonna go back to square one now. You can't use or accept humor unless you are, who's going to give me the word? The same as you cannot execute a technique effectively unless you are
Relaxed.
what? Someone said it, I think.
Relaxed.
Relax.
What did you say, Francis?
Relaxed.
Relaxed. You can only accept humor if you're relaxed. If you're uptight, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. Or it won't even go anywhere. It won't even go in one ear. Okay. So, yeah. So that's
the word for the Japanese use for softly, yawarakai, like yawara as in jiu-jitsu, the same concept, the same idea.
Softly, yeah.
Softly, do it relaxed.
Yeah, do it relaxed. Do it subtly. I mean, you don't have to, you know, the most effective techniques are the ones the students ask you, what did you do? And your response is, I'm not exactly sure. But anyway. Okay. I think we're going to stop at this point. And next week, we're going to, the two questions were first one will be, what arts, if any, will help evolve your jiu-jitsu, evolve or change your jiu-jitsu? I don't know who came up with that question, but I think it needs an explanation. And the other one is bullying in public and in the martial arts. Okay. And I'm just going to say one thing because this is Jay's baby.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
there is, I know as a teacher, and we've all done some bullying as teachers, but I'll ask the question now just to think of it. Is pushing students or how do you say, making them do things they don't think they can do and getting on their case to do it, is that bullying.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Because I know I have done it. I know most of us as sensei have done it to one extent or another.
Yep.
You know, and so I'm just throwing that question in there, you know. So maybe there's, back for a better phrase, maybe there's positive, maybe bullying is not the right word to use. Maybe it's just belief in the student that they can do it if they simply decide to do it. And now we're back to the mind games again.
Yeah.
Or is bullying something that puts down the person, denigrates them?
Yep.
Okay, so maybe that'll be the first thing we need to do, is separate the two, because I know there are sensei and teachers that denigrate students. I've seen it happen.
Yep.
And
Sensei, may I throw another word in here?
pardon?
May I throw another word in here and just
Sure.
just rephrase your question? Is pushing students to attempt techniques bullying? Could we also ask if is pushing students to attempt techniques chiding? If I ask and I got a smile on my face and I'm chiding them, I don't feel like I'm bullying, and yet I'm still nudging them. I don't know if pushing is the right word, nudging them in the direction. So if it's bullying, it's a really soft form of it.
Yeah.
Nudging is a soft form of bullying. Anyway, so, you know, I'm not trying to negate Jay's concerns, but you know, I do think we need to differentiate, and we can do that next week on the 4th of March. Excuse me, 4th of March. So those will be probably the two topics, and that bullying topic, I'm sure, is going to be another major topic like this one is, and if it continues on through 2 sessions, that's fine as well. Okay. Anyway,
Sensei, on that point, if your sensei teaches you by slamming you very, very hard into the mat, which may or may not have happened to someone here, is that a good way to learn and teach?
Absolutely not.
Well, I had the experience of the Mandeville Mauler. Just really, that's the way he teaches, and it's very, very effective, I must say. It gets you out of your head, and one couldn't say that's bullying, but very good teaching. Would you concur?
I think I know Seki has planted me through the mat a few times.
Yes. Yes.
It was always to make a point. There was an intent there, and there was a lesson to be learned.
A point or an indentation in the mat.
Well,
Thankfully, there's no point.
I was able to get up, but I knew this guy who maybe weighed 100 pounds in a wet gi. I knew this guy had thrown me and planted me into the ground. You know, but the other side of the coin is he knew I knew how to break the fall. So he had enough confidence in me that I might say, my God, that was a hard throw, but I was okay. You know, so the rhetorical question to you is, did those students or did the person who threw them know that they would be okay, or had the confidence?
I think we need to differentiate between harshness and bullying. Like, you can have a very harsh instructor.
Yes.
That doesn't mean they're bullying you.
Right.
And I think that, becomes a gray area then of intention and reception, sort of. If you're receiving that harshness as bullying, then, you can say you felt bullied, while the other person can say they did not feel like they were bullying you. They were just being harsh. But if you're looking for harsh training, if I go to some monastery or something in Tibet or something, I expect certain harsh conditions to befall me, and I'd almost feel like like I got a less experience if that didn't happen, right? I wouldn't think of it like, why are they bullying me? I'd be like, aren't you supposed to be hitting me with sticks? But if you know that harshness is there, then it's just harshness. I think it almost comes down to, are you bullying to make yourself feel better, or are you being harsh to bring about a change in the student?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
There's another differentiation. Jay, we're causing you all sorts of grief to a relatively simple problem.
I already been through it.
Because like Seki was an absolute, I hate to say it, he was an SOB on the mat. He knew what he was doing, but he had no sympathy for anyone. But off the mat, the guy had a heart of gold. And it just that's what made people like it, because they knew where his heart was.
Yeah.
He wanted you to do well. He was harsh. But he had this other side where he could take you under his wing and nurture you. I almost considered him to be like a second father to me, because of the way he, the way he treated me. He's a very giving person. But on the mat, no way. Unless you were a little kid, then he was nice. Anyway, anyhow, well, we're going to leave this off at the next meeting because we want Jay to have a lot of fun.
I will.
And so now we've got bullying and harshness and strictness and persistence and all these other things that are going to come into this. And I have no doubt there's a very fine line between some of them. And we'll get to that on the 4th. Okay. So I want to thank all of you for being here and participating. I know some of you mainly just took the information in. I hope the Zoom meeting was worthwhile. And we'll see you again on the 4th. And we had like 11 people this time, actually, at one point. So that's
Sensei, before you close completely, here you go.
Do what? That's it. That's it.
Alan Jackson.
And I got what was the name of that song again?
Don't rock the jukebox.
Don't rock. Yeah. Maybe if I get the time, and it's just a matter of time and finding out who to write.
Alan Jackson.
Yeah, Alan Jackson.
Well, not necessarily him, but who owns the copyright? And maybe the record label, or you don't know. But maybe I'll try to
post it on YouTube. They'll let you know.
Yeah, ASCAP. Go to
They email you to
ASCAP.com.
take it down.
Go to BMI.com or ASCAP.com.
BMI.com?
BMI.com or ASCAP, ASCAP.com. It's what I do for a living every day, guys.
Yeah, because I can send them the video and say, can we do this? I mean, I'm not trying to sell it.
No.
Or anything, but it's just a great video that is a lot of fun.
Yeah, if it's really small, they probably won't even reply to you, which means you're probably okay, as long as it doesn't go viral, in which case they'll sue you.
It doesn't go where?
Say that again, sir.
It doesn't go where?
If it doesn't go viral, as long as it's just right here, they're not going to bother you. I don't. But when people come to me with music that my company owns, and it's a small thing, I ignore them. And my way of ignoring them is my way of saying, go ahead. I don't want to know about it. Keep it small. But if I hear about it, there's going to be trouble. Oh, that's it.
I mean, I've gone to black belt in century martial art for excerpts from my book. One is going to be a revised picture that is going to be in the April issue of Kokoro. But I said, this is what I want to do with it. can I have permission? And they said, yeah, go ahead, it's fine. You know, I do try to respect other people's property because, you know, and people have asked me for permission to reproduce parts of a book, and I say, I have no problem with it, but you need to contact the publisher. There, have a great week. Don't do anything too dangerous. Visualize a lot. Use it very little. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
And,
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone.
and
Bye.
Bye-bye.